The memory fabrication cascade. Think about your earliest childhood memory. Really picture it. The colors, the sounds, the way it felt. Hold on to that image. Now let me tell you something disturbing. The memory is probably false. Not metaphorically false. Not slightly inaccurate. Completely fabricated. A fiction your brain constructed and convinced you is real. Every time you remember something, you're not accessing a recording. You're rebuilding it from fragments. And each time you rebuild it, you change it. Your most cherished memories, the ones you've recalled most often, are probably the most corrupted. This is Uncomfortable Theories. I'm your host, Janet Robinson. Act 1. The Reconstruction Process. Here's what most people believe about memory. Your brain works like a hard drive, recording experiences and storing them permanently. When you remember something, you're just playing back the recording. That's completely wrong. According to decades of neuroscience research, memory doesn't work like recording. It works like reconstruction. When you experience something, your brain doesn't save a complete file. It saves fragments, sensory details, emotions, contextual cues, scattered across different regions of your brain. When you remember that event, your brain pulls these fragments together and rebuilds the experience. But here's the problem. Every time you reconstruct a memory, you alter it. Neuroscientist Karim Nader demonstrated in 2000 that when you recall a memory, it enters what's called a labile state. It becomes temporarily unstable and vulnerable to modification. The process of restabilizing that memory is called reconsolidation. And during reconsolidation, the memory changes. Your current emotional state colors the memory. Leading questions introduce false details. New information gets woven in. And when the memory reconsolidates, when it gets saved again, it's slightly different than before. You're not remembering your past. You're creating a new version of it every single time. Act 2. The Lost in the Mall Experiment. In the early 1990s, psychologist Elizabeth Loftus wanted to prove something radical, that you could implant entirely false memories in people's minds. She developed what became known as the Lost in the Mall technique. Here's how it worked. Researchers would approach participants and tell them they wanted to discuss childhood memories. They'd present 4 stories from the participants' childhood, 3 real events confirmed by family members, and 1 completely fabricated story about getting lost in a shopping mall around age 5. The false story included specific details, the mall's name, being frightened and crying, eventually being found by an elderly woman and reunited with family. Then researchers asked participants to recall these events in detail over several interview sessions. The results were disturbing. About 25% of participants not only remembered the false event, they elaborated on it. They added sensory details, emotional reactions, specific conversations, things that never happened. In one case, a 14-year-old boy named Chris was told he'd been lost in a Spokane mall at age 5. By the end of the study, Chris had remembered the elderly man who found him wearing a flannel shirt. He remembered feeling scared, but also embarrassed. He remembered his mother crying when she found him. None of it happened. When researchers debriefed participants and revealed that one story was false, many couldn't identify which one. 5 out of 24 participants actually chose one of the true memories as the false one and insisted the mall incident was real. A 2023 replication study with 123 participants found that 35% developed false memories of being lost, even higher than the original study. Loftus and other researchers went further. They implanted memories of being attacked by a vicious animal, of witnessing demonic possession, of getting sick from certain foods as a child, which then changed people's actual food preferences. It's not hard to implant false memories. It's disturbingly easy. Act 3, the Corruption Cascade. But it gets worse. You don't need a researcher deliberately planting false memories. Your brain does it to itself constantly. Studies show that people remember their grades as better than they actually were. They remember giving more to charity than they did. They remember voting in elections they skipped. They remember their children walking and talking earlier than they actually did. We distort memories in a prestige-enhancing direction without anyone intervening. And here's the terrifying part. The more you recall a memory, the more corrupted it becomes. Think about your most vivid childhood memory, the one you've told as a story dozens of times. That memory has been through dozens of cycles of recall and reconsolidation. Each time, small details shifted, emotions intensified. The narrative became clearer, more dramatic, more meaningful. That memory you treasure, the one that feels crystal clear, is probably the least accurate one you have. Meanwhile, memories you've never recalled might still be relatively intact. But the moment you remember them, they start degrading. It's a cascade. The act of remembering destroys the accuracy of the memory. Act 4. The ship of Theseus of self. Here's where it becomes existential. You know the ship of Theseus paradox. A wooden ship has its planks replaced one by one over years. Eventually, every piece is new. Is it still the same ship? Your memories work the same way. Every time you recall who you are, your origin story, your defining moments, your personal narrative, you're replacing planks. Gradually, subtly, your identity gets reconstructed into something different. The person you think you were as a child? That's not an accurate memory. That's a character you've created through repeated storytelling. That traumatic event that made you who you are. Every time you've processed it, talked about it, thought about it, you've changed it. The current version might be completely different from what actually happened. Your sense of self is built on memories. But if those memories are fabricated, constantly reconstructed and corrupted, then your identity is built on fiction. You're not the person you think you are. You're a story you keep rewriting. And here's the really disturbing part. You can't stop. Every time you try to remember the real version of a memory to preserve it, you corrupt it further. The act of trying to maintain your identity destroys its accuracy. Act 5. The Eyewitness Catastrophe. This isn't just philosophical. It has real-world consequences that ruin lives. The legal system relies heavily on eyewitness testimony. Juries trust it. Judges give it enormous weight. But memory research shows eyewitnesses are horrifyingly unreliable. Elizabeth Loftus studied over 300 cases of wrongful conviction where DNA evidence later exonerated the accused. 3/4 of those cases involved faulty eyewitness testimony. People confidently identify the wrong person. They remember details that were never there. They reconstruct events based on what investigators suggest happened rather than what they actually saw. In one case, Steve Titus was convicted of rape based on a victim's eyewitness identification. The victim was absolutely certain. She remembered his face clearly. She was wrong. A journalist later tracked down the real rapist. But by then, Titus had lost his job, his fiancée, and his faith in the justice system. He died of a stress-related heart attack at age 35. His life was destroyed by someone's false memory, a memory that felt completely real to the person who had it. Act 6. No original copy. So where does this leave us? You cannot trust your own memories. Every recollection is a reconstruction. Every reconstruction is a corruption. The past you remember isn't the past that happened. The childhood you recall is partially fiction. That defining moment that shaped your personality, it might not have happened that way. Or at all. Your entire sense of who you are, your identity, your origin story, the narrative of how you became you, is built on memories that have been rewritten dozens or hundreds of times. You are not remembering your life. You're writing historical fiction about yourself and believing it's a documentary. And the worst part? There's no way to access the original. The moment you try to remember what really happened, you corrupt the memory further. Every attempt to preserve the truth destroys it. Conclusion. So what do you do with this knowledge? You could try to stop remembering. Stop telling your stories. Stop reconstructing your past. But then who are you? Or you could accept that memory isn't about accuracy. It's about meaning. The story you tell yourself about your past might not be true, but it's the story that makes you who you are right now. Maybe the fabrication isn't a bug. Maybe it's the whole point. Maybe we're not supposed to remember accurately. We're supposed to remember usefully. Still terrifying, though. This has been Uncomfortable Theories. I've been your host, Janet Robinson. Question everything. Trust nothing. And remember, every time you remember this episode, you'll change what I said. And eventually, you won't remember the truth at all.